Real messy.
Yeah, it's a bit cramped, hey?
This is a big cabin.
This is a big cabin.
Yeah. I'll show you where the other guys live.
How did you get the big room?
Because I didn't leave the ship. I've been on board for 4 years now.
Right.
Well, 18 months on this vessel, and prior to that, a few years on the other ship. So.
You've worked your way up to the big room.
Yeah, essentially. I started out first year. I was in a cabin with 4 guys, and then I was on the floor for one campaign.
On the floor.
Sleeping on the floor, and then I was in one with 3 downstairs here, and now I've got one with just me, which is nice.
Right. And that's 4 years of going to the Antarctica, is it?
4 years, yeah, four summers in Antarctica now. So
yeah,
I'm dying to see a bit of sunshine. What we see on these trips is spectacular. You know, massive tabletop icebergs, all different colours, shapes, sizes. You know, lots of endangered species, endangered whale species, the seals, leopard seals, birds, yeah, big storms.
Yeah, tell me about some of these storms.
I guess you can imagine if you could pick up, if you were big enough, you picked up the ship and shook it around in your hand. That's essentially what happens to us for weeks on end.
Yeah. And
yeah, some of these storms, we sort of ended up in one the size of Australia once. The whole screen on the weather computer was just red, and yeah, it was pretty nasty. I mean, it's certainly not enjoyable, but it is rather exhilarating to sort of get out on deck and get swamped by waves, and
right.
you got to clip on, but yeah, it's good fun. The other ship spent the last bit of our campaign searching for a Norwegian yacht that sunk in a massive storm down there, and our ship sustained a bit of damage. It destroyed wrecked a New Zealand warship. They had to go home. Right. It's the same storm, so yeah, life and limb down there is it's a fine line, yeah. And nature very much rules Antarctica still.
Yeah, I'd be interested to know what is kind of a day in the life here. I mean, this is the big room, so to speak, and it's fairly small. So I mean, when do you wake up usually? What?
We start at we have a meeting at 8 o'clock, and then usually we'll get the deck department together and we'll talk about what we're going to do. Have a toolbox talk, I guess you can say, what kind of jobs we're going to do today. Yeah, it's fairly varied. You know, there's a lot of different skill sets that you have to become familiar with, and a lot of different types of machinery and tools and stuff like that. Obviously, when we're doing operations, you know, if we're intervening against a whaling vessel, then it's all go. It's pretty exciting. Yeah. Other times, it's, you know, in really rough weather, there's not much you can do. It's just impossible to even move. So to try and work on something is just, there's no point. So yeah. It's often sort of pick up a good book or do something else like that.
Get seasick.
Get seasick. Some people have a real hard time with that, and they sort of disappear for weeks on end. Yeah. They eventually come good, but yeah.
Do you get seasick very much?
I've been lucky. I don't get seasick. Not physically ill. I mean, I certainly I've felt it, like you know, when you're up forward there and it's going up 5 stories and down 5 stories, and you're focused on doing something up there. Yeah. You feel yourself start to sweat, and you can feel it. But yeah, I've never thrown up. Thank Christ.
Not even after a night of drinking on the Sea Shepherd?
Well, that's different.
Yeah. Can you give me a ripping yarn about the epic sea battles? Mm. Yeah, that's what I want, an epic yarn.
Last year's campaign, the security vessel, one of the Japanese whaling ships, deliberately sort of rammed and ran over one of our vessels, and cutting it. They virtually cut it in half. It was a carbon fibre boat, and they just took the whole nose off, rammed it, run over it, and it eventually, we tried to take it under tow, but it sank, and we were just lucky that no one was killed. All the guys were on the top of the boat, and they kind of got knocked out of the way. One guy cop broken ribs, but he was. I mean, it was lucky because that was it. It went straight through their sleeping quarters. It's like we're sitting here, and a ship comes straight through the middle of this room.
It's completely insane. Did you press charges?
No one was willing to investigate the matter any further. The Australian Maritime Authority and New Zealand's Maritime Safety said that they weren't able to investigate it because the Japanese wouldn't provide them with any evidence. Yet we had 5 high-definition video cameras filming the entire event. We had over 40 witnesses, but just because the Japanese refused to cooperate, there was nothing came of it. We certainly don't have the law on our side, we don't have governments on our side, but we do have public opinion, and the world is watching us down there, and we make sure of that. We make sure we bring the media along, we bring people along who are going to witness this, photographers, reporters, and by doing so we get public opinion. I mean, at the end of the day, it's if enough people want this whaling to end in the Southern Ocean, then they'll support us and back us up when we need some help. So there was a huge outrage over that incident, and if anything, while it cost us a boat and risked the lives of our crew, that's what we're there to do. I mean, it's a small price to pay if you're going to save a species from extinction. So yeah.
Now you said that the laws and governments weren't backing you, but isn't the whaling illegal?
See, this is also an area where, this is what Sea Shepherd does. There's all these environmental laws and treaties that have been written up. Many of them are non-binding, so a country can sign it and then be under no obligation, practical obligation to fulfill its, its promises. But there are certain laws down there. A lot of the time the Japanese whaling fleet is in what has been designated as Australia's exclusive economic zone. It's illegal to hunt whales under Australian law, but the government is not willing to enforce it. They're not willing to go against their biggest trading partner and arrest these vessels and seize them. They'd rather turn a blind eye and talk rhetoric and go through organisations like the International Whaling Commission, which basically they sit there every year and talk about how one side is anti-whaling, one side is pro-whaling, and it goes nowhere. Right. And anyone can break the rules, they can flaunt the rules. It's supposed to be a sanctuary in the Southern Ocean, but you can continue to kill whales down there. So we come in there and we try and enforce these things and make governments stand by their promises. Right.
Yeah. And what do you think was the breaking point that caused the Japanese to turn back?
It's been continual harassment over the last 7 years, and each year we've gotten stronger, and they have captured less whales, and it sort of started to get to the point when I joined. We were starting to save as many whales as they were killing, so we were cutting their quota in half. And this year each year they get into debt. It's a government subsidised program, and they're not making a profit off the whale meat, but they have to still fork out the money every year. It's a very expensive operation. 7 ships, hundreds of crew. They keep having to fork the money out, and I think it's just causing them to get weaker and weaker every year. And of course they're not catching the whales either, and they spend their whole season running from us, and they know that if they come back again, they'll just spend the next 3 months running away from us instead of catching whales.
Right. So at a certain point they did a cost-benefit analysis.
They should have done it years ago, but I think because of the media that's come out and the public attention is now focused solely on this issue, they can't hide anymore. They can't hide, in the shadows. The Japanese public and certain government ministers want to know where this money's going to and why it's been spent in such a manner.
You're like 35, 36 people on a boat?
Yep.
And so, you don't really have much space, so you have to either love or hate each other. You'll be seeing each other all the time. Does it get kind of soap opera-esque sometimes, or?
It doesn't take long to get to know each other, I guess you could say, and I think what makes it work, is that we're all here for similar reasons. If we're here to save wildlife, we're here to protect, vulnerable ecosystems, and that thread runs through the entire crew. And if people aren't here for the right reasons, they learn pretty quickly because it's hard work. Yeah. And they go, but the people that stick around, the people that stick through with it, they're united by that common goal.
Now, what's the most difficult part of the life on the ship? What's the most difficult part of your job?
I guess you're always on the job. I mean, even when you're resting, you know, you're always on the ship. It's not, you can't just step off and go down the street and get away from it for the day. Even now we're in port, it's pretty hard to get off the ship. There's responsibilities, you know, there's things that need doing, and the work never stops. I guess it's constant upkeep. You're never finished. So I guess you know, there's a tendency for people to burn out, and especially after 3 months at sea, and then get back and you just keep going and going and going, because there's so many things that need doing, and there's just not enough people doing it.
Well, in the last couple 100 years, we've changed the world vastly.
It's been such dramatic changes, and we're really getting to a critical point in time where if we don't pull our fingers out and get moving on these things, we're not going to have much left. But
you're a man of words. Could you paint me a picture of some of the things that you've seen, some imagery from Antarctica?
And I've had some pretty special moments with the wildlife down there. I mean, when I was telling you about the trying to shake these harpoon boats, and we're right in front of them, and it was a beautiful day, but you know, we were stopping them, we were turning them and keeping them away from our vessel and allowing it to get away, and a minke whale popped up right in front of us, right in front of them, and I was able to sort of point up to the harpooners up on the harpoon deck and point back down at the whale, and they saw it and they knew that was one that they weren't going to get.
Yeah. And
I've had that happen a couple of times now. Like a few years ago, me and another fellow, Giles, boarded one of the harpoon boats, and we were kept on board for a few days there. And while we were confined to our cabin, when I was looking out the porthole, and a huge fin whale surfaced right outside, and it stayed with us for a little bit, and the last thing I saw was its tail fluke sort of go back down, and you know, that was another one that they weren't going to get. So you have these moments where, you know, all this hard work, and somehow it feels like you're being thanked by the animals. Yeah,
I could see that. Yeah. Now wait, you boarded a ship?
Yeah, I mean, we were in Australian waters, and at this stage the Australian government was newly elected, and they'd promised to get tough on whaling. They'd promised to send a ship down to the Southern Ocean to monitor the Japanese whaling fleet in anticipation of bringing proceedings to the International Court.
Right.
The thing is, governments like to make promises before election night, and they weren't doing anything about the issue. So one, it was trying to force the Australian government into, you know, backing its word, its pre-election promises, and two, it was to, you know, confront the Japanese whaling fleet, get on board, speak to their captain, and tell them what they were doing was illegal, because no one else was doing it. The government should have been doing it. Right. My government should have been doing it, but they weren't.
So you pulled up alongside?
Yeah, we came in alongside on the small boat and hopped over, managed to get on board. It wasn't easy. It was the boat was travelling at sort of a great rate of knots, and was moving. So 1 minute there'd be, you know, the lower deck, and the next minute it'd be 2 meters in the air, and we just had to time it. We got on board, and all the whalers came out. They weren't on the decks, but they all came out. They grabbed us. There was a physical confrontation, and we were tied up. And then sort of frog marched. They tried to throw me back into the sea.
What the F?
And then they frog marched us back up onto another deck, and you know, we had ropes all over us, and then down inside the vessel, and we were sort of on there for 2 days while the governments went back and forth with each other, Japanese government and the Australian government, and you know, blew up in the media, and it sort of forced the Australian government to send a vessel into the to the whaling fleet. So, but then after that, they stayed with the whaling fleet, and they gathered the evidence, and they put it in the papers, and then they made the promise the other year that they'd take Japan to started proceedings against Japan in the International Court. So it did have a flow-on effect. When I talked to the guys on board, I was like, "Where have you guys been for the last few weeks?" And they're like, "We weren't here. We were off doing something else. We weren't ever gonna, you know, it wasn't gonna happen." So.